Hey guys, this is Pradeep and this video is for SeleniumFramework.com. This video supplements the explanation for a data-driven framework. So most likely you might have ended up on this video by going to my website and walking through the data-driven framework. So what I'll be starting with is going through the data-driven framework project, explaining the folder structure, looking at some key code, and then eventually executing it and looking at it, so that later when you want to check out the project code base and execute it on your box, you know what to expect. Okay, so anyways, this is a Cucumber project. As you see, what you would find when you open the project is you'll find features folder, lib, and then the rest of the regular files what you find in a Cucumber project. So under the features you would have two feature files. One is contact form Excel and another one is contact form YAML. So we are using the YAML and Excel data to explain the data-driven framework. So what I went ahead and did was I separated out into two feature files. So let's open a feature file and take a look at it. Let's say, so for the Excel data, right, what we are going to do is we are going to open Automation Practice website. We are going to hit on Contact Us, and then a form would open up where we will fill the form with certain data which comes in this case from an Excel sheet, and we will the first scenario, what it does, it uses row 1, which takes in that data set and sets that. And the second one, scenario outline, is it takes two values, right, and loops through each data set. And so essentially what we are trying to say here is data is driving the execution of the test case. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you some of the other files. So we have another directory here called lib. The reason we have lib, I could have take this files, put it directly under support too, but I'd like to keep it separate, and that's one of the best practices I follow. So you'd have a lib config, and under the lib config you would find one file called object repository YAML. So object repository, just a little context around this is QTP has made it pretty famous, where interacting with the objects on the screen, we maintain the object state in a data structure called object repository in QTP. So if we want to interact with any object, we call the reference to it, and then we interact with the object. Now here, with the advent of Selenium and many other open source libraries and tools, we don't have to really think about expensive ways to maintain an object repository. Here what we are trying to specify is it's a simple HTML locator information for the fields on the contact form. So you see on the contact form, right, we have a contact heading. Oh, by the way, I probably did not show you the contact form. So let's first take a look at what we would like to do, right? So we would hit automationpractice.com. Okay, once we hit on automationpractice.com, we would hit this link, Contact Us. Once we hit this, we are on this form. This is a form which is what we would like to fill and explain. So we have a subject heading here, which is a drop down. Then we have an email address text field, order reference, and then a message field. So these four fields is what I would want to input data and then eventually hit the send button. So this is my scenario essentially. So if you take a look at this inspect element for subject heading, right? Let me go ahead and do that. So it has an ID underscore contact. So similarly for the other fields, what I essentially do is I put it as a key value pair. I say subject heading ID is ID contact. That's the value of my HTML locator. Similarly, if you go ahead and inspect other IDs for each of those fields, you would find these IDs. So essentially put it in a YAML file, right? And then how do we read this YAML file? It's pretty simple. All we do is in the env.rb, right? We load this file here. We say object repository OR is YAML.load file and pass this file to it. So this OR will contain the hash data structure representing the object repository. Okay, again, this is explained on the website as well. The second thing, once we have looked at object repository, the next thing what I'd like to show you is the data helper, right? This is where we are externalizing the data. So what we went ahead and did was we defined a data helper, okay? And the module data helper has a bunch of methods, right? A bunch of methods, and it has some private methods. Now the reason I kept this as private methods is because I don't want any other class or module use it apart from the module methods using it. Okay, so the first method what I'd like to focus on is this one. It says class self, and then it has a bunch of attribute accessors, right? So this essentially is means that these are class variables. Think of class variables on the Ruby and very similar to the static variables on the Java side. So what I'm trying to specify here is, each of these variables which hold my data structure, the test data structure, I would like to have only one single copy of it. Multiple calling programs, if they intend to use this, they would have the same state of it. So that's how we go ahead and define an attribute accessor. As you know, is when we define a variable in a Ruby class or module as an attribute accessor, it means the getter and the setter methods are already generated in the background. Okay, then I have a directory by name data default directory. So if I don't specify any directory to set for my data, by default it takes libconfig data, which is pretty much this one. Okay, and similarly, once I set the directory, I also want to set some default values for the files. So let's say, for example, this default Excel file, right? What happens is I'm reading the Excel file from an environment variable, which is data Excel file. Okay, so this line pretty much means that I check if there is a value for the environment variable data Excel file. If there is, right, I just use the existing value. If there is not, then I go ahead and set it to default.xlsx. Okay, this again, the reason why we have put this is I want the user to have the configurability to specify the data file and override the default one if necessary. So where do we override that? We have a setter method here, right? So this is for the directory, by the way. So we set the data directory. So if we override that, the data directory will get set to the value which the user passes in as the argument. Similarly for the file, right? If I have to set it, I would have to set it in my environment variable, right? Data Excel file. And where do I set that environment variable? Right? I can go to my cucumber.yaml, right? Let's say, I can set it like this. For a Cucumber profile, I can go ahead and set it data YAML file as beta data. That means now my scenarios would use beta data instead of the default, right? Default.xlsx. For example, if you're using XLS file. Okay. So moving further on, let's see, how let's look at an Excel format. So here what I'm passing to the data Excel hash is my data sheet, right, and the row index. Now I'm assuming here that by the time this method is called, the default directory and the Excel workbook both are set, right? Once again I repeat, by the time I call this method, I'm assuming that the default directory, right, and the Excel file both are set. So that's why I first go ahead and parse this, the data default directory, get in the Excel file, and I parse this and get the workbook object. And we have seen, how to parse using Ruby Excel gem, and we have gone into all kinds of details on the intermediate tutorial test data section. And then we retrieve the sheet, and here we get the header row. Why do we get the header row? So let's take a look at the default.xlsx file. Okay, so if I go ahead and take a look at default.xlsx, right, you can see that what I have here is 3 rows. The header contains, right? The header here contains the column values, and this is the actual values of this. So my data set is on row 2 and row 3, and the header contains the column name. So what I plan to do here is I would want to get hashes, right? The first hash being this row 1 and row 2, and the hash would contain key value pairs, heading customer service, email abc@xyz.com, order reference abc123, message dataset1. Similarly, the second dataset would the second hash would contain, you know, this as keys, row 1 as keys, and values as row 3. So essentially would have two datasets there. So what we go ahead and do here is we first get the header row, right? And then we get an header array because the get table method on the Excel sheet, right, takes in an array of strings, and the strings being the column names. So this logic here, all it does is it retrieves the header row, and then column by column it will retrieve and then make it into a string array, because this is what we need, right? Heading, email, order reference, message, each of these we would have to convert it into an array of strings, and eventually we pass that, right, to the get table. And then when we call on the key table, this data structure here contains an array of hash maps, right? And it will contain 2 hash maps here in our case. And which one do I need? I need the one for which I pass in the row index. So what I do, I take my row index and do a -2, because, you know, obviously doing the conversion between the index starts at 0, and moreover the first row is containing the header, so I'd have to subtract 2 to actually get my my hash, which represents the data set which I pass it. Okay, so that's the logic around this whole data helper here, what we're using. And you know, this similar logic applies to the YAML. I've also made it you know, extensible for JSON, and you know, obviously you can go ahead and add XML if you would like to, and any other data format. So leaving it open at this time. And you know, in case you're not able to still connect the dots at this point in time, go ahead and take a you know, read at each of these links here. I've posted the comments. Take a read of these, and then you know, get an understanding of how to parse different data formats. And once you know how to parse that, this code is probably, you know, a much less complex code compared to once you understand how this you know, parsing of and all the options present on parsing different data format exists. Okay, so that's about data helper, right? We would want to use this data helper and then eventually pass our data. Okay, so we talked about object repository, and then we talked about data helper. Now let's go ahead and see how these pieces connect together. So coming back to the contact form Excel, right? Now here I think I need to pass 2 here. Okay, anyways. So here what I do is, you know, I open automation practice website, click contact us, contact the customer service with Excel row to dataset. So I want to pass in this one, this row here. So what I go ahead and do, let's see, look at the step definition. The first step definition, right? Just opening the browser. The second step definition, click contact us, right? Clicking the contact. The third step definition, this is where the entire logic is. So first what we do here is, here what do we pass here? We pass the row number, right? The row number is exactly the row number what you see on the Excel sheet. So if it says 2, then pass 2. Do not make any conversions, because that logic is already handled in the data helper module. Okay, so we pass in 2, that means we want to use dataset 2 with the values customer service, abc@xyz.com, and so on. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the code. What we are doing here is, first we are printing the object repository, right? We talked about object repository, you know, here where we said the HTML locator information, how we identify each of these locators. We have parsed this, and in the env.rb we have loaded this into a constant here, right? OR. So that's what we are using here, just so that I know what is the object repository values. I'm printing it so that when we look at the output, we know we are using the right values. Then the next thing what we do is we say dataset is equal to data XL hash. Remember, this method was from the data module, data helper module here. If you come to data helper module, we say data XL hash, this method. We have mixed in this method, right? And that's why we are directly using it under the step definition. So all we have to say is, data XL hash, pass in the sheet, right? Sheet 1 in our case here, and all we do is pass the row index, which is 2 in our case, which we have passed from the cucumber here, right? So once we retrieve that, we get the data set. And just again, so that we are confident that we are using the right data set, went ahead and printed this, right? Once we print that, next thing what we have to do, we have to start filling these values on the form, right? On the form here, the first one, right? So the first value is customer service here. What we do is, this is general water API we have been using all the way from basic tutorial, intermediate tutorial. So I'm not going to go into the details of that. So here what we say is, we say ID, and then the ID value comes from the object repository, which is in our case, for the first one, it is ID_contact. And then we do a select, and then the data value comes from the data set. Okay, data set. And then which data value do we need? We need the heading. So if we go ahead and open, right, heading. If we say heading, that means customer service is retrieved. If we say email, which is the key, abc@xyz.com is written. So we go ahead and we do a select, and then select the option, and the option value comes from the data. Similarly, for this text field email, we go ahead and do, we first retrieve the HTML locator information from object repository, and then we do a data set, and then we retrieve the actual email value from the Excel workbook. So on and so forth, and until we eventually hit the submit button. Okay, so that's about the logic here. Now if I want to repeat this, right, we have talked about scenario outline again in the intermediate tutorial, where we have seen how to deal with the test data with the data tables. So I'm not going to go into the details, but here what we are doing is exactly the same scenario, right? But here I'm parameterizing the row index and passing the row index values here. So now what it does is it repeats the test case for both of these rows, row 2 and row 3. Okay, so so let's see if we have missed anything else. Yeah, so as usual, let's look at the gem file, right? The gem file contains all the gems we have been using all the way from basic, intermediate tutorial. But don't forget to add the Ruby Excel, because we are using Excel here. Okay. YAML is anyways part of Ruby runtime, so you don't have to worry about it at this time. Let's see. All right, I think we have talked about each of those files here. Let's go ahead and execute and see what happens when we execute. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and execute first Excel. Okay, I'm going to close all the files here, and I will execute. All right, let's go ahead and execute this. Alright, there you go. It clicked the contact us, it filled the values dataset 1 as you have seen in the message, and it has printed the object repository and current dataset here. This is just for our confirmation that we are doing the right thing, right? So what I expect to happen is there should be another run, right? The first scenario and the second scenario outline has 2 datasets. All right. Okay, cool. So seems like it ran fine. All the 3 scenarios passed, and while executing each scenario, we are looking at the dataset and also the object repository. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results, right? The results are written here. All right, you can see that everything is green, and it took 45 seconds. And while it has printed, right, each of these, whatever we are printing onto the console, it's printing it here. Okay. Screenshots has no images. That means everything has passed, no failure images. So that was about Excel. Let's talk a little bit about YAML, right? So YAML is exactly the same thing, just that we are reading from a YAML file instead of an Excel file. So again, the same concepts apply. The default.yaml under the data directory, we go ahead and open this. We have dataset1, right? And we have a heading, the value being this email, order reference, message, and dataset2 similarly. Okay. So as you can see, the only difference is we would be calling a different method on the data helper now instead of data Excel hash. So let's go ahead and take a look at the contact form YAML, right? The contact form YAML is also the same thing, but now we pass the dataset key because we want to use this dataset, that is these values. So we pass in the dataset key now. And similarly, we parameterize the dataset and use dataset and dataset2. So if you go in and look at the code behind it, right? So again, printing the object repository, printing the dataset. Now here, it's exactly the same code, right? Just that the only difference between the Excel and this code is that in the Excel we are passing the row number, and here we are passing the dataset key. Because in Excel, we don't have any other key to retrieve row by row. So I just went ahead for now and use the row number. Okay. So otherwise the code is pretty much the same, exactly the same. So let me go ahead and execute this, right, to see if it runs the same, right? Go ahead and run this. All right, click contact us, and you see dataset 1. That is the first scenario. Now the scenario outline, right? It has two scenarios which should run. Okay, so all three scenarios passed, and we take a look at the results HTML, right? Let's go ahead and do a results HTML. All of them passed, three scenarios in 46 seconds. The Excel was 45 seconds, so I think didn't make a big difference there. So that's about data driven. Now let's say you want to override. You don't want to use the default .yaml, but let's say you want to use another file. Maybe I'm just making up a hypothetical scenario where I say, well, I have some beta testing going on, and I have a different data set. So let's say you have a beta data, right? The beta data looks exactly the same, instead just that it contains dataset 3 and dataset 4. Okay, so let's say if you want to run with this data, how do you run? So the easiest way, what I would suggest, since we have already baked in all the code required to parameterize the YAML file in the data module, so you can go to cucumber.yaml, and let's say you want to execute with beta data. All right, let me copy this and put it under the default profile, because I don't want to confuse right now talking about Cucumber profile. So we are always running with the default profile so far. So let's just say data YAML file is beta data instead of the default. So all you have to do is set this, and then now if you go back and run this, right, how do we know the difference? Dataset 1, right, in beta data contains dataset 3. Okay, but the default one contains dataset 1. So that way we know that it has picked up this file. So let me go ahead and run this now. Okay, you can see it has printed dataset3. Anyways, so that's how you can specify a different file altogether when you want to execute. So the real crux of the code is in the data helper here, where it has helped us externalize and make this specify the default data directory and data files extremely configurable. Okay, so all this code is checked into my GitHub repository. You should be, and the link is provided on the seleniumframework.com website as well. You should be able to check it out and use it. And really appreciate if you have any comments or thoughts. And you're always welcome to drop me a line, send an email, contact form on this Selenium Framework website, whichever you feel comfortable. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this video. We will catch up soon again.